Yo, what's good? Big Z here, and today I'm going to show you guys how to make this. As you can see, I'm in a new studio space. I just moved a couple weeks ago up to New York City. I'm still getting everything set up. I apologize in advance for the sound in this room. I ordered some custom acoustic panels and bass traps, but they're not going to be here for like 6 weeks, which kind of sucks. Anyway, I'll be improving the lights and the sound and everything in here in the next few weeks. But let's get into this remake. It's KREAM's remix of Hear Me Say by Jonas Blue, which is their most recent release at the moment when I'm making this video. KREAM is a Norwegian duo, if you haven't heard of them, and they're actually brothers, which I think is pretty cool because I actually have a twin brother myself. But over the past couple years, KREAM has developed a melodic house style with a darker twist to it. When you normally think of melodic house artists like Lane 8, you think of more uplifting, happy music, but KREAM has a darker side to it. And it's obviously working well for them. They have around 4 million monthly listeners on Spotify. So step one to making music like KREAM would be to write your track in a minor key. This track in particular is in the key of D minor. And a main element they include in a lot of their tracks is a big synth melody like this one right here. Other house tracks that are played in clubs tend to have bass lines that don't really deviate from the root note that much. But KREAM takes a more melodic approach to their bass lines and melodies, which actually makes them more memorable, in my opinion. Let's talk about the overall arrangement. Notice how they space everything in the arrangement so the mix never gets too crowded. So the drop starts off with a big stab sound and introduces that repeating lead melody that you hear. And it isn't until the second bar of the drop when they introduce that big lead melody. And if you take a closer look at this bass line down here, you'll see that it actually stays on the same note while all that stuff is happening up above it, and it doesn't move until after that big melody happens. So it's just on the same root note for the first 2 bars, and then we get some movement in the bass line. Spacing out the arrangement like this allows them to emphasize different sounds during the drop, and it keeps things interesting. Now I'm going to talk about all of the sound design and how I remade all these sounds. And if we start with this deep synth sound, I think they actually might have used a sound from one of my packs. So in my Sounds of 2020 pack right here, there's a synth called Deep Stab 4, and I didn't have to change anything to get it sounding exactly like it does in their track. You can check out that pack down below if you're interested in it, but this sound is really the melodic bed for the whole track. It provides the bass line that everything else sits on top of. If I take all the effects off in the effects tab over here, we just start with these 2 wavetables right here. They both have 7 voices of unison and some detune. Then the filter really shapes the sound. It's being modulated by envelope 1 here. Then we need some compression and distortion on there to beef it up. Then we have an EQ that makes it sound a little more professional in my opinion. Very subtle though. And then I just have a reverb and delay putting it in a space. I also have all the macros enabled so you can give the sound more movement throughout the drop. Now let's talk about the lead arpeggio sound. Normally when you have a repeating arpeggio sound, you put it more in the background of your mix to add some atmosphere, but this one is really front and center and drives the whole rhythm of the drop forward. The sound itself is a simple saw wave, just layered with some white noise. Here's the envelope that's modulating the filter cutoff. And for effects, I just have some multi-band compression and delay on there. But for this sound, I want to highlight the importance of EQ in sound design. So I have this external EQ on this sound, and I'll just toggle it on and off so you can hear how big of a difference it makes. The EQ is really the difference between having a basic and cheesy saw sound to having something that sounds much more rich and expensive. Speaking of EQ, it also plays an important role in the main lead melody here. So I'm going to play this sound without the EQ and then with it. I'm just reducing some harsh frequencies and boosting some other nicer frequencies, and it helps it sit in the mix a lot better. This sound starts with a hypo wave and it has 4 voices of unison and is heavily detuned, which really gives the sound its main character. We've got this envelope 1 here modulating the filter cutoff, and then in the effects section, just to make it sound bigger, I'm adding some multi-band compression, some reverb, and that EQ I showed you before. Then with external processing, I'm using FabFilter Saturn to make it sound a little bit grittier. I'm using the Destroy mode down here, which sounds really cool on a subtle level. So the drive is at like 8%, and the mix is only at 39%, because I didn't want to overdo it. And I know I had reverb inside Serum, but I'm also adding an external reverb just to make it sound even bigger. So that explains the whole melodic framework for the track, but there are some cool stabs and fills to add some excitement to the drop. Like right when the drop hits, there's this big stab sound that adds a lot of energy and impact to the start of the drop. It's just a basic saw sound with a lot of reverb on it, but it adds a ton of energy. And speaking of adding energy, the last note of the main melody here is emphasized by a big percussion hit with a lot of reverb on it. And then I added this reverb throw from the main melody underneath it to make it sound a little bit bigger than that. So for reverb and delay throws, I actually just like to copy the sound down to another track. So here's what that sounds like with no effects. It's just the same note, the last note in the melody, and all I'm doing is adding a high pass filter and a big reverb. And layered with that percussion sound, it gives it a nice tonal quality. And then, as always, we want more energy in the second half of the drop. So we add in a string drone, an atmospheric pluck sound, and the rest of the drums. By the way, if you want the drum samples and synth sounds I used in this remake, you can get those down below for free. So I think there are interesting things to learn from this remix when you look at how the arrangement is spaced out, giving each sound its moment to shine. It's also a good example of how to use melodies to make modern house music more memorable. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next week. Peace.